I was 26 when I married into the family I thought would save me. David was kind. That was the first thing I noticed about him. The way he held doors for strangers, the way he remembered his waitress's name, the way he looked at me like I was something precious he'd found and was afraid to break. I had never been looked at like that. Growing up in foster care, you learn that attention is currency, and most people spend it carefully. David spent his freely, generously, like he had an infinite supply. His mother was different. Vivian met me at the door of their suburban colonial the first time David brought me home. She was 62 then, silver hair in a perfect bob, pearls at her throat, the kind of woman who made you feel underdressed in jeans and a sweater even when she was wearing slacks and a cardigan. She smiled when David introduced me. It was a good smile, warm, welcoming, the kind that made you relax your shoulders and think, maybe this will work. Maybe I can belong here. I should have noticed that the smile didn't reach her eyes, that her handshake was a fraction too firm, a fraction too long, that she looked at David like he was a painting she'd commissioned and I was a smudge on the canvas. Elena, she said, tasting the name. That's ethnic, isn't it? It's Spanish, I said. My mother was from Barcelona. I never knew her, but the social worker who placed me in my first foster home thought I should keep the name. For connection, she said. How thoughtful, Vivian replied, and something in her tone made the word sound like how unnecessary. Well, I'm sure you'll grow on us. David has always had unusual tastes. David squeezed my hand. I squeezed back, harder than I meant to. I was used to being unusual. I was used to being the girl with no parents at the parent-teacher conference, the girl with no emergency contact, the girl who learned to make herself small so no one would notice they had to make room for her. What I wasn't used to was someone making me feel small on purpose while smiling. I married him anyway, because I loved him, because I was tired of being alone, because some part of me, the part that still believed in fairy tales despite everything, thought that love was a bridge you could cross into any family, any home, any life. I was wrong about bridges. Some families are islands, and Vivian was determined to keep me offshore. She started with the apartment. David and I found a loft downtown, exposed brick, big windows, walking distance to the courthouse where I worked as a family law attorney. Vivian visited once, walked through the rooms like she was inspecting a crime scene, and declared it unsuitable for grandchildren. Children need yards, she said. They need good school districts. They need to grow up around family, not artists and students. We're not having children yet, Mom, David said, and I felt his hand tighten on mine. Yet, Vivian repeated like it was a promise she was holding him to. Well, when you do, I'm just thinking ahead. A mother always thinks ahead. She moved on to my cooking. I made paella for Thanksgiving, the only recipe I had from my mother, scribbled on a napkin by a social worker who'd met her once before she died and I became a ward of the state. Vivian took one bite, set down her fork and said, Interesting. Very spicy. David, you remember Aunt Patricia's turkey dressing? Now that was a family recipe, worth passing down. I stopped cooking for family dinners after that. It was easier to bring wine to help with dishes, to make myself useful in ways that didn't invite criticism. Then she found the name. David and I had been trying for a year when I finally got pregnant. It was early, too early to tell anyone, but I knew immediately. I woke up one morning with a certainty in my chest that felt like knowledge I'd always had, waiting to be remembered. I was going to be a mother. I was going to build the family I'd never had, piece by piece, love by love. We decided not to tell anyone until the second trimester. We decided not to find out the gender. And we decided, most importantly, not to share the name. The name was everything to me. In foster care, names were administrative details, case numbers, file labels, the thing teachers called out before sighing when you didn't have a parent to sign the permission slip. My name, Elena, was the only thing my mother had given me. The only proof that I came from somewhere, from someone, from a love that had existed even if it couldn't last. For my baby, I wanted a name with weight, with history, with a story that would tell them, you were wanted, you were chosen, you were named with intention. I found it in an unexpected place. My third foster home, the one that lasted 2 years before the family moved and couldn't take me with them, had a social worker named Rose. She was 50, black, with laugh lines around her eyes and a voice that made you feel like you were being held. She was the first adult who asked me what I wanted, not what I needed. The first who remembered my birthday without a case file reminder. The first who told me, Your name is beautiful, Elena. Don't let anyone make you feel like you have to shrink it to fit their mouth. She died of a stroke when I was 16. I wasn't notified. I was already in my fourth placement, and news didn't travel between cases. I found out years later when I was old enough to search for her myself. She had no children, no family she spoke of, just 30 years of social work, hundreds of kids like me who she tried to make feel seen, and a small pension that went to a scholarship fund for foster youth. I wanted my daughter to carry her name, to be part of her legacy, even if Rose never knew it. To grow up knowing that family isn't just blood, it's the people who choose to see you. Rose, that was the name. David loved it. We whispered it to each other at night, pressed our hands to my still flat stomach, and promised our daughter a world where she would never have to make herself small. I made the mistake of telling Vivian. It was my 7th month. The pregnancy was high risk, placenta previa, bed rest, constant monitoring. Vivian had been helpful in her way, bringing casseroles I didn't want, cleaning my apartment while I rested, rearranging my kitchen more efficiently. I was too tired to fight, too grateful for the illusion of care to notice the invasion of control. She found the nursery journal. I had been writing letters to Rose, recording my hopes, my fears, the story of her name. Vivian read it while I was at a doctor's appointment. When I came home, she was sitting in my living room, the journal on her lap, her face composed in an expression I would later recognize as calculation. "Rose," she said, not looking up. "That's traditional, old-fashioned." "It's meaningful," I said, taking the journal from her. "She'll know where she came from, who she was named for." "She'll know she was named for a stranger," Vivian corrected, her voice gentle as poison. "A social worker, Elena, really? You want your daughter's first story to be about the foster system, about a woman who was paid to care for you." "She wasn't paid to care," I said, my voice shaking. "She chose to, that's different." "Is it?" Vivian stood, smoothing her skirt. "Well, I'm sure you'll reconsider. A name is a legacy, after all, and David's family has legacies to uphold. Rose, that was my mother's middle name, you know. Perhaps that's the connection you were looking for without realizing. Family, not charity." She left. I didn't tell David about the conversation. I told myself she was just being protective, just being a mother, just being the kind of person who cared about tradition in ways I didn't understand. I told myself it didn't matter what Vivian thought. The name was chosen. The name was ours. I told myself a lot of things back then. I was very good at telling myself stories that ended with me being okay. I lost Rose at 34 weeks. It happened slowly, then all at once. A bleed. A rush to the hospital, a monitor showing a heartbeat that was there, then wasn't, then was a flat line that sounded like every door I'd ever had closed in my face. The doctors used words like spontaneous and unpreventable, and sometimes these things happen. They said I was lucky to be alive, that the placenta had detached completely, that I had lost a lot of blood. I didn't feel lucky. I felt hollowed out, like someone had scooped out everything I was building and left me with the shell of a person who used to have a future. David sat by my bed for 3 days. He held my hand. He cried. He said all the right things. "We'll get through this. We can try again. I love you, I love you, I love you." And then he went home to shower, and he didn't come back for 8 hours. When he returned, his eyes were red in a different way, and he smelled like his mother's perfume. "Vivian thinks we should take some time," he said, not looking at me. "Before we make any decisions, about trying again, about everything." "She thinks," I repeated. "Or you think, she's worried about you, about us. She says grief can make people do things they regret and we should be careful not to." "Not to what, David? Not to grieve, not to name our daughter, not to be angry that she's gone." He flinched. "Not to blame each other. She's just trying to help." Vivian's help, I learned over the following weeks, looked like this. Daily visits where she talked about moving forward and not dwelling. Suggestions that I return to work to keep busy. Comments about how some women aren't meant to be mothers, and it's better to know now than to struggle for years. She brought brochures for support groups she had researched, all of them focused on acceptance and letting go. She never said Rose's name. She referred to her as the baby, then the situation, then finally stopped referring to her at all. It was as if my daughter had never existed, never been named, never been wanted. As if the only way Vivian could tolerate my grief was to erase its cause. I tried to fight. I tried to tell David that his mother was poisoning our marriage, that her help was control, that I needed him to choose me just once. He said he did choose me. He said he loved me. He said he was just tired, just grieving in his own way, just needing his mother because she was the only family he'd ever known. I understood that in a way. I had spent my whole life needing family, needing belonging, needing someone to look at me and say, asterisk, you are mine and I am yours. Asterisk, I couldn't fault him for needing the same thing, even if the family he chose was the one that was destroying mine. But understanding didn't save us. Nothing saved us. 6 weeks after I lost Rose, David asked for a separation. Just for a while, he said. Just until we're both in a better place. He moved back to his mother's house. He took the photo of our ultrasound that I'd kept on the nightstand. He left me with an apartment full of baby things I'd been too heartbroken to return, and a silence so complete I could hear my own heartbeat, wondering if it was still worth having. I didn't hear from him for 2 months. When he finally called, it was to say he wanted a divorce. Mom thinks it's for the best, he said. She thinks we rushed into things, that we weren't ready, that you need to find yourself without me. Your mother thinks, I said again. The phrase had become a refrain, a warning, a punchline to a joke that wasn't funny. She's just looking out for me. She's my mom, Alina, she loves me. And what about me? I asked. Who looks out for me? There was a long silence. Then, you'll be fine, you're strong, you've always been strong. He hung up. I sat on the floor of the nursery we'd never finished, surrounded by unopened boxes of diapers and a crib that would never be used, and I understood that strength was just another word for being alone long enough to stop expecting rescue. I rebuilt. That's what strong women do, apparently. We rebuild. I went back to work, family law, ironically, helping other people navigate the ruins of their families while mine was still smoldering. I sold the loft, moved to a smaller apartment, donated the baby clothes to a foster care organization. I kept the journal. I kept the name. I kept the locket with Rose's ultrasound photo, though I couldn't open it without crying. I didn't date. I didn't make friends easily. I existed in a holding pattern, waiting for something I couldn't name, something that would tell me the waiting was over and the living could begin again. It began, unexpectedly, with a birth announcement. Laura, David's younger sister, had gotten pregnant 3 months after I lost Rose. The pregnancy had been easy, uncomplicated, the kind that made Vivian glow with satisfaction at family dinners I was no longer invited to. I knew about it peripherally, social media, mutual acquaintances, the occasional update from David that I didn't respond to. I had trained myself not to feel anything when I heard their names. Not jealousy, not anger, not the desperate wish that things had been different. Just nothing, a flat line where my heart used to beat. The baby was born in April, a girl, healthy, perfect, 7 pounds 3 ounces. Her name was Rose. I saw it on Facebook first. Vivian's post, shared by a mutual friend, * welcome to the world. Rose Vivian, our little miracle, named for 2 strong women in our family. Grandma Rose would be so proud, and I know her namesake is watching from heaven. * I read it 3 times, then I read it again, then I called David. She took her name, I said when he answered. No hello, no pretense. Your mother took my daughter's name and gave it to your sister like it was hers to give. Alina, calm down, don't tell me to calm down. Rose was my mother's name for my daughter. It was private, it was ours. And your mother knew that and she took it, and now your sister's baby is wearing it like a hand-me-down. It's just a name, David said, and I heard Vivian's voice in his, the same tone, the same dismissal. Mom thought it would be a nice tribute, to honor what you went through, to keep Rose's memory alive in the family. She's not in your family, I whispered. She was mine, and your mother made sure she never existed, and now she's using her name to pretend she cared. You're being paranoid, David said. You're making this about you when it's about Laura's baby. Can't you just be happy for them? Can't you just let it go? I let go of the phone. I didn't hang up, I just stopped holding it, let it fall to the couch beside me, let his voice become a distant murmur of * Alina. Alina, are you there? * until the battery died or he gave up. Then I opened the journal. I read every letter I'd written to my daughter, every promise, every hope, every story of the woman she was named for, and I made a decision, not revenge, not exactly, something more precise, something more permanent. Vivian had spent her life collecting names, collecting legacies, collecting people like they were assets to be managed, stories to be rewritten, identities to be reassigned when the original owner became inconvenient. She had taken my daughter's name and made it hers. She had taken my husband and made him a child again. She had taken my family and replaced it with her own narrative, her own history, her own version of who deserved to belong. I was going to take back the only thing she couldn't replace, the truth about who she was. Welcome to Little Bunny Stories. If you're new here, my name is Alina, and this is the story of how I stopped begging for a seat at someone else's table and built my own. If you've ever had your grief turned into someone else's performance, if you've ever been told to let go of something that was never yours to hold, subscribe. This one's for you. Here's my story. Family law teaches you that every family has secrets. The ones that surface in custody battles, in inheritance disputes, in the quiet moments before a deposition when someone finally tells you what really happened. I'd spent 5 years listening to those secrets, cataloging them, using them to protect the people who hired me. I had never used them to hurt someone, until Vivian. It started with a routine search. Vivian was 65, healthy, active in her church and her bridge club and her charity boards. She had a will, of course. David had mentioned it once, casually, how everything would be taken care of when the time came. She had a living trust. She had a financial advisor who'd been with the family for 30 years. She also had a sealed adoption record from 1989. I found it by accident, at first. A name on a church bulletin board, a volunteer opportunity for a women's shelter that Vivian had founded in the late 80s, then abruptly left. A gap in her resume that no one questioned because no one looked. But I looked. I had learned to look for gaps, for silences, for the spaces between the stories people told about themselves. The shelter had closed in 1990. Vivian had married David's father in 1991, and in between there was a birth certificate. A baby girl, 6 pounds 2 ounces. Mother's name, Vivian Hartwell. Father's name, unknown. The baby had been placed for adoption within 48 hours. The records were sealed, the file buried, the existence erased from every family photo, every holiday card, every mention of our family history. Vivian had built her life as a matriarch on the foundation of a daughter she had never claimed, a daughter who had never been given a name, only a case number and a prayer. I found her through the adoption registry, a mutual consent system that allowed adult adoptees to search for their birth parents. She had registered 5 years ago. No match. Because Vivian had never registered. Never looked. Never wanted to know. Her name was Maya. She was 35, a teacher in Chicago, married, no children. She had posted on adoption forums, searching for information about her birth mother. All she knew was the name of the shelter, the year, the city. She didn't know that her birth mother had gone on to have a perfect family, a perfect life, a perfect narrative that had no room for a mistake made at 26. I contacted her through the registry. I told her I was a family law attorney who had come across information that might interest her. I didn't tell her who I was or why I was looking. I just asked if she wanted to know the truth. She said yes. Of course she said yes. That's the thing about people who have been erased. We always want to know if there's a story that explains why, even if the story hurts. Even if the story confirms what we feared, that we were never wanted, only hidden. I flew to Chicago. We met at a coffee shop near her school, a warm, cluttered place that smelled like cinnamon and chalk dust. Maya was small, dark-haired, with Vivian's sharp cheekbones and something softer in her eyes. She wore a sweater with a coffee stain on the sleeve and laughed when she noticed me noticing it. "Third graders," she said. "They're weapons of mass destruction with juice boxes." I liked her immediately. That was the hardest part, liking her. Knowing what I was about to do to her life, knowing that the truth I was offering was a gift wrapped in barbed wire. "Your birth mother," I said, after we talked for an hour about her students, her husband, her search. "I found her. She's alive. She's prominent in her community, suburban, wealthy. She has 2 children, a son and a daughter. She never told them about you." Maya's hand shook around her coffee cup. Did she ever look for me?" "No," I said, and I hated myself for saying it, for being the messenger of a rejection that wasn't mine to deliver. "She never registered, never searched. As far as I can tell, she never told anyone you existed." "Why are you telling me this?" Meyer asked. "Why do you care?" And I told her. I told her about Rose, about Vivian, about the name that was stolen and the grief that was erased and the family that was built on silence. I told her I was offering her a choice, not a crusade. She could know the truth and walk away. She could know the truth and confront Vivian herself, or she could know the truth and let me help her do something with it. "What something?" Meyer asked. "Recognition," I said. "Not money, not a relationship she doesn't want to give. Just the legal right to exist in her history, to be named in her records, to be acknowledged as her firstborn child, which you are whether she likes it or not." "And you?" Meyer asked, her eyes sharp in a way that reminded me uncomfortably of Vivian. "What do you get out of this?" I thought about lying, about saying justice, closure, the satisfaction of righting a wrong, but Maya deserved better than performance. She deserved the same truth I was offering her. I get to give her a name she can't control, I said. I get to make her face the daughter she erased, while she pretends to mourn the granddaughter she never knew. I get to show her that names have owners, and some owners don't forgive being borrowed without permission. Maya was quiet for a long time, then she reached across the table and took my hand. Her fingers were warm, calloused from chalk and paper cuts. Let's do it, she said, but not for revenge. For the record, for the truth, for every kid who grew up wondering if they were worth looking for. I squeezed her hand. For every kid, I agreed. The lawsuit was simple in concept, complicated in execution. A petition to unseal the adoption records and establish filiation, legal recognition of the parent-child relationship. We didn't ask for money. We didn't ask for inheritance rights, though Maya would have been entitled to them. We asked for one thing, acknowledgement. Vivian's lawyers fought it, of course. They argued privacy, statute of limitations, the sealed nature of the records. They tried to paint Meyer as a gold digger, a blackmailer, a disturbed woman making claims for attention. They didn't know that I had spent 3 years building a reputation as one of the most meticulous family law attorneys in the state. They didn't know that I had documented every step, every source, every piece of evidence with the precision of someone who had learned to survive by paying attention to details. They also didn't know about the name. It was my idea, though Meyer agreed immediately when I proposed it. The petition, when we filed it, included a request that Maya be allowed to reclaim her birth name, the name that had been left blank on her original birth certificate, replaced by a case number and a foster family surname. We asked the court to recognize her right to choose her own identity, her own legacy, her own place in a history that had tried to erase her. We asked that she be named Rose, not after Vivian's mother, not after Laura's baby, after the woman who had chosen to see me when no one else did, after the daughter I had lost, after the truth that Vivian had spent 30 years burying under silence and casseroles and perfect suburban smiles. The court accepted the petition. The hearing was scheduled for November, 3 weeks before Laura's daughter's first birthday. I made sure Vivian knew the date. I made sure she knew what we were asking for. I made sure she understood that this wasn't about money or revenge or even Maya's need for mother. It was about names. About who gets to give them, who gets to take them, and what happens when the people who have been renamed finally claim the right to name themselves. The courtroom was small, paneled in wood that smelled like polish and old decisions. Vivian sat at the defendant's table with her lawyer, a man in an expensive suit who kept whispering to her like she was a bomb that might go off. David was there, in the gallery, his face a mask I couldn't read. Laura was there too, holding her baby, holding Rose, though I forced myself not to look at them, not to feel the weight of a name that now belonged to 2 children, one living and one lost. Maya sat beside me, calm in a navy dress she'd bought for the occasion. She had told her husband she was attending a professional conference. She had told her school she was taking a personal day. She had told no one the truth except me, and I carried it like a responsibility, like a debt, like the only thing I had left to give. The judge was a woman in her 60s, sharp-eyed, no nonsense. She had read the petition. She had reviewed the evidence. She had, I suspected, seen enough family secrets to know that the ones that reached her courtroom were usually the tip of an iceberg that had already sunk something precious. "Miss Hartwell," she said to Vivian, "you are opposing this petition on grounds of privacy and sealed records. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Vivian's lawyer answered for her. "My client has built a life, a family, a reputation. This petition serves no legitimate purpose except to harass, Miss Hartwell." The judge interrupted, directly at Vivian. "I asked you." Vivian's hands were folded on the table. They were shaking, I noticed, just slightly. The same hands that had rearranged my kitchen, that had held Laura's baby, that had never once reached for me in comfort. I was young," Vivian said. "It was a different time. I did what I thought was best. I gave her up so she could have a better life. I don't see why that needs to be dragged into the open now." "And the name?" the judge asked. "The petition requests that Miss Chen be recognized with the name Rose. Is there a significance to that name that the court should understand?" Vivian's face changed. Something flickered there, recognition, maybe, or the beginning of understanding. She looked at me for the first time since entering the courtroom, really looked, and I saw her see me. Not as David's ex-wife, not as the foster girl who couldn't keep a pregnancy, not as the inconvenience she'd managed to excise from her family. As the woman who had named her daughter, as the woman whose daughter's name she had stolen, as the woman who was now offering that name to the daughter Vivian had never claimed, in a transaction that couldn't be controlled or dismissed or rewritten into something palatable. Rose was my mother's name, Vivian said, her voice steady but her eyes darting. It's a family name. It belongs to my family. Does it? I asked. I shouldn't have spoken. I was counsel, not a party, but the judge didn't reprimand me. She just waited like the courtroom was holding its breath. Rose was the name I chose for my daughter, I said. The daughter I lost, your son's daughter, your granddaughter, who you never acknowledged, whose nursery you rearranged while I was at the hospital, whose name you gave to your other daughter like it was a family heirloom you had the right to pass down. I stood. Maya stood with me, a silent presence at my side. Rose was the name of the woman who saw me when I was invisible, I continued. A social worker, a stranger, the only adult who ever told me I was worth keeping. I gave that name to my daughter because I wanted her to carry that legacy. To know that family is a choice, not an inheritance. And when you took it, when you gave it to Laura's baby and pretended it was yours to give, you proved that you don't understand the difference. I turned to Maya. This woman, your birth mother, has spent 30 years building a life on silence, on the erasure of your existence, on the assumption that names, like people, can be owned and reassigned at will. I'm asking the court to recognize that you have the right to your own name, your own history, your own place in a story that she tried to write without you. I looked back at Vivian. And I'm asking that the name be Rose, not because it belongs to your family, because it belongs to mine. And because some names, once given with love, can't be stolen, they can only be returned. The courtroom was silent. David was staring at his mother like he was seeing her for the first time. Laura was crying, the baby, her Rose, fussing in her arms. And Vivian was crumbling, not dramatically, not with tears or screams or the theatrical collapse she might have orchestrated for sympathy. Just crumbling. The straight spine bending, perfect hands knotting together, the mask of control finally cracking to show the woman underneath, scared, small, furious at being seen. She's my daughter, Vivian whispered. My first daughter. I gave her up because I had to, because there was no other way. You don't understand, you with your foster homes and your social workers and your ideas about choice. Some of us didn't have choices. Some of us did what we had to do to survive. Then survive this, I said. Acknowledge her. Name her, let her exist in your history, even if you can't let her exist in your life. That's all she's asking. That's all any of us are asking. The judge was quiet for a long moment. Then she picked up her pen and began to write. The court granted the petition. Maya's adoption records were unsealed. Vivian was named as her birth mother on the amended birth certificate. And Maya, at 35, was legally recognized as Rose Chen, a name she chose, a legacy she claimed, a story she was finally allowed to write. Vivian didn't attend the ceremony where Maya received her new birth certificate. She didn't speak to the press, didn't issue a statement, didn't acknowledge the daughter she'd hidden for 3 decades. Within a year, she had moved to a smaller house in a different suburb, sold her church membership, retreated from the charity boards and bridge clubs that had defined her public life. David visited her occasionally, he told me in a rare email, but she was different now. Smaller, angry in a way that had no target except herself. David and I didn't reconcile. He wrote to me once after the hearing asking if we could talk. I didn't respond. Not because I hated him, I didn't, not anymore, but because I finally understood that his love had never been strong enough to survive his mother's disapproval, and I was done building homes in places that collapsed at the first storm. I built something else instead. I founded a fund, Rose's name, for mothers who had lost pregnancies, who needed legal help navigating insurance disputes, workplace discrimination, the bureaucratic nightmare of proving that a child who didn't survive still mattered. We provided counseling, financial assistance, advocacy. We helped women name their losses, claim their grief, refuse the silence that society so often demanded. At the inauguration, I hung a plaque with 2 names. Rose Chen, 2024, Maya's new name, the daughter found. And Rose, 2019 to 2019, my daughter, the daughter lost. 2 women who would never meet, connected by a name that had traveled through theft and silence and finally come home. Maya was there. She brought her husband, her students' artwork, a story about how she had told her 3rd graders that she was getting a new name, and they had thrown a renaming party with cupcakes and handmade cards. They get it, she told me. Kids understand about names, about being called something that doesn't fit and finding the one that does. We stood together, 2 women who had been renamed by other people's choices, who had finally claimed the right to name ourselves. We didn't hug, We didn't cry. We just stood there, shoulder to shoulder, and let the silence between us be enough. I am Alina Rose Vargas. I am 34 years old. I was a wife, briefly. I was a mother, even more briefly. I am a lawyer, a founder, a woman who learned that the family you choose is not always the one that chooses you back. And I am finally, the author of my own name. See you in the next story.